Keanu Reeves tried to buy a car in cash. They laughed until he showed them who he really was. Keanu Reeves stepped into the luxury car showroom, dressed in his usual simple attire, worn-out jeans, a black t-shirt, and an old leather jacket. His hair was slightly messy, and his beard was untrimmed. The moment he entered, a few salesmen glanced at him and smirked. He didn't look like the kind of customer who could afford the cars displayed inside. Sleek, expensive machines worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Keanu walked toward a stunning black sports car and ran his fingers over its polished surface. A young salesman, Mark, approached him with a polite but uninterested smile. "That's a limited edition model," Mark said, eyeing Keanu from head to toe. "It costs over $300,000. Keanu nodded. "It's beautiful. I'd like to buy it." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Sure, sir. I'll just need some details. Financing options or—" "No financing," Keanu interrupted. "I'll pay in cash." For a second, Mark was silent. Then he chuckled, shaking his head. "Cash? You mean you want to pay the full amount right now?" Keanu simply nodded. Mark couldn't hold back a laugh. He turned slightly and signaled to his colleague, Jason, who was watching from the counter. Jason walked over, curiosity in his eyes. "What's up?" he asked. "This gentleman here," Mark said, suppressing another chuckle, "wants to buy the car in cash." Jason looked at Keanu, then at Mark. Then both of them burst into laughter. Their laughter wasn't just amusement. It was disbelief. To them, Keanu was just another man trying to act rich. Keanu smiled slightly. He had seen this reaction before. He didn't get offended easily. Instead of arguing, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he made a call. "Hey, it's me," he said. "Yeah, I need $300,000 delivered to the showroom. Right now." Mark and Jason stopped laughing. Their smiles faded as they exchanged confused glances. Was this guy serious? Keanu put his phone away and turned to them. "It'll be here in 15 minutes. The showroom fell silent. Other employees who had overheard the conversation were now watching. Mark and Jason shifted uncomfortably. It was becoming clear that this wasn't an ordinary customer. 15 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside the showroom. The door opened, and a man in a sharp suit stepped out, carrying a silver briefcase. He walked straight to Keanu and handed it to him. Keanu placed the briefcase on the showroom counter, unlatched it, and flipped it open. Stacks of $100 bills filled the case, neatly arranged. Mark's face turned pale. Jason swallowed hard. Keanu looked at them calmly. "Is this enough, or should I add a little extra for your time?" The manager of the showroom, who had been watching from his office, rushed forward. His face was a mixture of shock and embarrassment. "Mr. Reeves, I apologize for any misunderstanding." He shot a furious glance at Mark and Jason, who now stood frozen. Keanu, however, wasn't angry. He simply smiled, closed the briefcase, and said, "I changed my mind. I don't think I want the car anymore." The entire showroom went dead silent. Mark's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Jason looked at the ground. The manager's face turned red. Keanu Reeves picked up the briefcase and walked toward the door. As he reached the exit, he turned back and said, "Next time, don't judge someone by their appearance." With that, he walked out, leaving behind stunned faces and a lesson no one in that showroom would ever forget. Keanu Reeves stepped out of the showroom, the briefcase still in his hand. The cool evening air brushed against his face as he walked toward the black SUV parked by the curb. The driver opened the door for him, but Keanu paused. He turned his head slightly and glanced back through the showroom's glass walls. Inside, Mark and Jason were still standing in shock. The manager was whispering something furiously to them, his hands gesturing wildly. Other employees exchanged awkward looks, realizing they had just witnessed something they talk about for years. Keanu smiled to himself and got into the SUV. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, he leaned back, his mind drifting elsewhere. He wasn't angry. He had experienced this kind of judgment before. People assuming he was a nobody just because he didn't flaunt his wealth. It didn't bother him anymore. But something about this encounter lingered in his thoughts. He tapped his fingers against the briefcase, staring at it in silence. Then after a few moments, he made another call. "Hey," he said when the line connected, "I need you to find me a small, independent car dealership. one that's struggling to stay afloat. The person on the other end responded quickly. Got it. I'll send you a few options. Keanu ended the call and stared out the window as the city lights blurred past. An hour later, he found himself standing outside a modest-looking car dealership on the quieter side of town. The sign above the entrance was slightly faded, and only a few cars sat in the lot, their price tags revealing they were far from luxury vehicles. A middle-aged man in a wrinkled shirt stood at the entrance, looking a little tired but still wearing a welcoming smile. Keanu walked up to him. You the owner? The man nodded. Yeah, name's Bill. What can I do for you? Keanu glanced around. How's business? Bill sighed. Not great. Sales have been slow. Big dealerships keep pushing us out. He forced a chuckle. But we get by. Keanu nodded, then placed the briefcase on the hood of an old sedan. He unlatched it and flipped it open. The sight of stacked cash made Bill's eyes widen in shock. What is this? Bill asked, his voice almost a whisper. Keanu smiled. A second chance. Bill blinked, staring at the money, then at Keanu. I don't understand. Keanu shut the briefcase and pushed it toward him. Take it. Invest in your business. Get better cars. Upgrade your showroom. Compete with the big guys. Bill hesitated, shaking his head. I can't just take this. Who are you? Keanu extended a hand. Just someone who believes in fairness. Bill stared at him for a long moment before finally shaking his hand, still in disbelief. As Keanu turned to leave, Bill called after him. Why are you doing this? Keanu paused, then looked back with a small smile. Because the right people deserve a chance. He walked away, leaving behind a man who would never forget the night a stranger walked into his struggling dealership and changed his life forever. Bill stood frozen, staring at the briefcase on the hood of the old sedan. His hands trembled as he slowly reached out and touched it, as if making sure it was real. The weight of the situation hit him all at once. $300,000 given to him without any conditions, by a man who owed him nothing. He looked up, but Keanu was already gone. The black SUV had disappeared into the night. For a long moment, Bill just stood there, his mind racing. This kind of thing didn't happen in real life. People didn't just walk into a struggling business and hand over a fortune. Was it a trick? Was there a catch? But deep down, he knew it was real. The next morning, Bill didn't waste any time. He called his wife, Susan, and his two employees, Mike and Tony, into his small office. He placed the briefcase on the table, flipped it open, and watched their faces turn from confusion to shock. Where did this come from? Susan whispered. Bill exhaled slowly. A man walked in last night and gave it to me. Mike frowned. For what? Bill shook his head. Nothing. He just believed in us. Tony, a young mechanic who had been working for Bill for years, ran a hand through his hair. So what are we going to do with it? Bill didn't hesitate. We're going to fight back. For years, his dealership had been overshadowed by big corporations, flashy showrooms, aggressive sales tactics, and endless marketing budgets. But now, for the first time in a long time, they had a real chance. Within days, Bill used the money to transform his business. He repaired the showroom, repainted the building, and put up a new sign that proudly displayed his family's name. He invested in better cars, improved customer service, and hired an expert to help with marketing. Word spread quickly. Customers who once ignored his dealership now gave it a second look. Slowly but surely, sales picked up. And then, the impossible happened. One afternoon, as Bill was reviewing some paperwork, a familiar black SUV pulled up outside. The door opened, and Keanu Reeves stepped out, dressed in the same simple attire as before. Bill rushed outside. You came back. Keanu smiled. I had to see what you did with the opportunity. Bill gestured around. The dealership looked completely different. Clean, professional, and full of energy. It's because of you, Bill said. Keanu shook his head. Number. It's because of you. I just gave you a chance. You did the rest. Just then, a luxury car pulled into the lot. Bill recognized the logo. It belonged to the same showroom where Keanu had been laughed at. Mark, the young salesman who had mocked him, stepped out, looking uncertain. Keanu and Bill exchanged glances. Mark cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Reeves, I didn't expect to see you here. Keanu smirked. Why? Because this place isn't fancy enough? Mark swallowed hard. Listen, about what happened at our dealership. I just... Keanu raised a hand, stopping him. You don't need to apologize. He then gestured toward Bill's dealership. You need to understand that value isn't measured by how expensive something looks. It's measured by the people behind it. Mark nodded slowly, embarrassment evident on his face. I think I understand that now. Keanu turned to Bill. Do you have a car this guy can afford? Bill chuckled, catching the joke, and nodded. I think we can work something out. As Mark hesitantly browsed the cars, Keanu looked around one last time. Bill's business was thriving, and not because of luck, but because he had the heart to push forward when given a chance. Keanu smiled. His work here was done. Days passed, and Bill's dealership continued to grow. The changes weren't just cosmetic. His confidence as a businessman had transformed. More customers were walking in, the local community was taking notice, and even the big dealerships that once ignored him were now watching him carefully. But Bill knew this was just the beginning. One evening, as he locked up the dealership, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hesitating for a moment, he answered. Bill, a deep voice said. Bill's grip on the phone tightened. Keanu? A chuckle came from the other end. You recognize my voice. Good. Bill smiled. After what you did for me, how could I forget? Keanu's tone became serious. I need you to do something for me. Bill's heart skipped a beat. Anything. There was a pause. Then Keanu said, I want you to help someone else, just like I helped you. Bill frowned. What do you mean? Keanu exhaled. There's a man named Robert. He's a mechanic. He's struggling to keep his garage open. He doesn't know I'm sending you, but I want you to go there. See what he needs. Help him. Bill was silent for a moment. Keanu had given him everything. His business, his confidence, his second chance. Now he was asking Bill to pass that kindness forward. A slow smile formed on Bill's face. I'll do it. The next morning, Bill drove to the small garage Keanu had told him about. It was an old, rundown shop on the edge of town. The sign was faded, and only 2 cars sat in the lot, both covered in dust. Inside, a tired-looking man in his late 50s was bent over an engine, his hands covered in grease. He barely looked up as Bill entered. Be with you in a minute, the man mumbled. Bill glanced around. The place had potential, but it was clear Robert was struggling. The tools were outdated, the shelves were nearly empty, and there was a sadness in the air, like a man trying to fight a battle he knew he was losing. Bill stepped forward. Robert? The man finally looked up, wiping his hands on an old rag. Yeah, who's asking? Bill smiled. Name's Bill. I own a dealership across town. Robert raised an eyebrow. And? Bill took a deep breath. I know what it's like to fight against the odds, and I know what it's like when someone believes in you. So, I'm here to help. Robert's eyes narrowed. Help? Why? Bill chuckled. Because someone once helped me, and now it's my turn. Robert stared at him for a long time, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then slowly a flicker of hope appeared in his tired eyes. And in that moment, Bill knew. This was just the beginning of something much bigger. Weeks passed, and Bill poured his energy into helping Robert, just as Keanu had once helped him. He provided new tools, repaired the garage's exterior, and even sent over customers from his dealership. Slowly but surely, Robert's business started turning around. But Bill wasn't done yet. One evening, as he was closing up his own dealership, a familiar black SUV pulled into the lot. The door opened, and Keanu stepped out, his usual calm smile on his face. Bill grinned. Didn't expect to see you again. Keanu chuckled. I had to check on you. I hear you've been busy. Bill shrugged. You told me to help someone. So I did. Keanu's smile widened. And how does it feel? Bill thought for a moment. He had spent years struggling, thinking only about survival. But now, after helping Robert, he felt something different, something deeper. It feels right, Bill admitted. Keanu nodded. That's the secret. Bill frowned. Secret? Keanu crossed his arms. People think success is about money, about having more, buying more, showing off more. But real success is about lifting others up. That's the part most people miss. Bill exhaled, letting the words sink in. He had spent his life believing that he was alone in his struggles, that business was just about competition and survival. But Keanu had shown him something else, something bigger. A movement had started. One act of kindness had led to another, and another, creating a ripple effect that no one could stop. Keanu patted Bill on the shoulder. "You've got the right mindset now. Just promise me one thing." Bill nodded. "Anything." Keanu's eyes twinkled. "When the time comes, pass it forward again." Bill smiled. "I will." Keanu gave him a small salute, then turned back to his SUV. As he drove away, Bill stood there for a long time, watching the taillights fade into the distance. He knew his life had changed forever, and he knew, without a doubt, that he would spend the rest of it changing the lives of others. True success isn't measured by what we gain, it's measured by what we give. The most powerful impact we can have in this world isn't in what we own, but in how we lift others up. When we choose to help someone in need, we start a chain reaction of kindness that can change lives, communities, and maybe even the world.